For all the latest on the SaWGuy podcast, be sure to subscribe and don't forget that bell icon.
Learned my lesson and left the scar, and now I see how you really are.
Welcome to the SaWGuy podcast. As always, y'all know I am the SaWGuy, and you're joining me for the beginning of year 2. And to start off year 2 right, I decided, well, fuck it, for episode 42, I'm going to give you my cult favorite, House. I'm pretty sure you're going to be noticing that I'm wearing a different mask. I made this mask a long time ago, and I always told myself, you know what, if I'm going to do an episode on House, I have to rock this mask, because it's, based on one of my favorite characters, Big Ben from it. If you've seen House, you know what I'm talking about. So without further ado, let's get this show started, right?
Hello, and welcome to the SaWGuy podcast.
I ain't no fucking clown.
That is better.
Now clear your minds. He knows what scares you.
I'm just gonna bash your brains. What the hell? The boogeyman is real, and you found him. What do you want?
I want to hear you scream.
Hell. Everybody loves popcorn.
Now, as I said, House is a cult favorite, and if you live where I live, here in good old Fresno, you would know that Alan Autry, he played, I guess you could say he had a cameo role as a cop, right? And the funny thing is, he was the mayor of Fresno for such a long time that if you lived in Fresno during the time when they were still playing like movies on TV and stuff like that, they would always play House. And I remember I saw it like at least 3 or 4 times when I was a kid in one day, and let alone, I was just like, oh shit, there's the mayor, all excited at first, and then afterwards you're like, okay, I see him all the time. I see him at the gas station. But anyways, House is one of those other favorites that I wanted to do too, because it's a callback to my very first episode, the Supernatural film. And I always said that, I consider House more of a supernatural film than it is like a ghost story or anything like that. And it also involves a lot of different themes, When I look at it, it involves basically a man living with his demons, but at the same time, it also raised a lot of awareness of things that was going on, like I do in every episode. That's not going to change. What I'm going to do is that I'm going to explain everything to you, about the whole movie and everything like that, and then throw in little tidbits and things like that, give you my point of view of things, and see where you guys see it from, Because, as I said, I like to watch these films, numerous times, from all different angles, But anyways, let's get started, right? So, House. It was actually released in theaters, believe it or not. It was released in theaters on the last day of February in 1986. And this film was written by Fred Dekker, who you might know, he basically did a lot of these, 80 films that had a lot of charm to it. He did, what was it? He did Night of the Creeps. He did The Monster Squad. Man, he's done so many. His most recent one is the new Predator that just came out, So he's been around for a while. He's been doing these kind of things, right? But anyways, he got the idea to do this film because, he saw the Twilight Zone movie back in the 80s, and he said, you know what? I want to do, like a horror anthology. And him and his buddies, they all kind of came together. They wrote up a bunch of stories. But what the downfall is that they didn't use all the different stories to it, So that's why I was just like, but you know what? He turned around and said, okay, well, let's use the story that I wrote for House, right? So he got with a bunch of his buddies, and, what I think is kind of funny, I don't know if I posted this, I can't remember if I posted this on my, Twitter or on my Facebook, but if you ever notice, if you watch House, it has a Friday the 13th feel to it. And a lot of people will tell you it's got a Friday the 13th feel to it because it was done, with the director of Steve Miner. Steve Miner was the guy who did Friday the 13th Part 2, and he did Friday the 13th Part 3. So he's, I guess you could say, the grandfather of Jason Voorhees. And then to top it off, you have Sean S. Cunningham, the producer, and one of the original creators of Friday the 13th working on this film. And, of all things, you have, the same composer who did the Ki Ma Ma Ma, the Jason theme, Harry Manfredi, or Fredini. Wait, did I say that right? Harry Manfredini. Yeah, Harry Manfredini. That's a long name. But he did the same actual composure to it. And so, if you watch the beginning of House, you hear like the deep bass, woo, You know, and almost, to me, I thought I was watching a Friday the 13th film for a minute. Like, whoa, okay, this is, sounds very similar here, right? And another thing, too, is that a lot of people, when they worked on this film, you also had Kane Hodder, who played Jason, you know, from Jason 7 all the way to Jason X, and including, you know, Jason the video game, or Friday the 13th video game. He did the stunts, which is also crazy. So, I mean, I guess you could say this is the Friday the 13th film that wasn't meant to be, or, you know, it basically showed their chops if they like, not walk away, but if they did something different than Friday the 13th. But either way, it was a great film. As I said, you know, I see a lot of different themes in this, and I'll break down the whole story right now for you, you know? So the movie starts off where it shows this kid, he's delivering groceries on this little Vespa scooter, right? He gets there, and it's this old big-ass house, you know, very, I guess you could say, classic mansion style, right? But it's so 80s. Had the white picket fence, had the driveway to the side with a garage not attached to the house. It had that baby blue, the white, and like the new pink kind of color scheme to it. But right when the kid goes inside carrying these groceries, you know, he's calling for Mrs. Hooper. And he's basically telling her, hey, I brought your groceries, right? It implies that this kid, he's helping out this older lady, right? He starts hearing noises. Do, 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 do. He sees these weird paintings that she draws, and he's like, ugh, sick. And then he gets up the stairs, and once he gets up the stairs, he sees that she's just fucking dangling from, like, the light fixture. And he, instead of calling the cops, he's like, ow! And he fucking, he runs out, you know, to his little Vespa scooter that, you know, and then he got it stuck on the curb, and takes off, right? Well, next scene it shows that they're burying the older lady. And then you see a young guy right there. And I guess you could say it was her brother-in-law. You know, it was her sister's husband. And, you know, he was telling the guy, who you later find out is Roger Cobb. He was telling him, you know, hey, it wasn't like her to go out like that, you know. My wife, she's crazy, but your aunt, you know, she was a heart of gold, you know. And so he took the kind words and everything. It was kind of a surreal, sad moment. And then they show that as she's going in, it goes into the next scene. You find out a little bit more about Roger Cobb. Roger Cobb is a writer, right? He writes horror stories, kind of like Stephen King. So he's at a book signing, he sees all these crazy fans and everything like that, and they're all trying to talk to him. And he's there with, I guess, his publicist or his agent. And they start talking, right? So everyone's all asking him, like, hey, what's your next book? Are you going to do another horror book, you know? And he basically said, no, I'm going to go ahead and do, you know, my stories of how I went through Vietnam. You got to remember, this is 1986, but the movie takes place in 1985. So the Vietnam War still was kind of, you know, fresh in a lot of America's minds still, you know. After that, then, you know, he hears all these fans talking about his ex-wife and everything like that. Like, oh, were you married to her? And he's like, well, I'm divorced now. Then, after the book signing, his agent tells him, hey, well, you know, you got to write a new horror story. Like, no one wants to hear about the Vietnam War. It's already done and over with. So Roger Cobb was like, you know what? I still need to write this book. Then it shows he goes home to a single bachelor pad. He opens the fridge. He sees the fucking TV dinners. Doesn't even open it. Just throws it in the microwave. And if you look closely, he puts it on for fucking 30 minutes. I was laughing at that. I was like, man, that's going to be some burnt-ass TV dinners, dude. But anyways, he goes to this, you know, his old-school computer. Because you got to remember, it's 80s, right? Turns it on, loads up, and he's getting ready to type. And then he calls the police. And then I guess he calls a detective, right? And the detective's like, no, haven't heard anything about your son, but you know we'll call you, right? So it doesn't tell you the story about everything yet. Then he puts the phone down, then he gets a phone call. He picks up, it's his wife. His wife is a famous actress in this film, right? So she's calling him up, and she's telling him about how she didn't win at the Oscars. They start having a little conversation. He tries to imply that he's having fun with his buddies when it's just him by himself, listening to the radio and shit, you know? And then afterwards, she, you know, talks to him about what had happened with his aunt. And then after that, you know, he was kind of, I guess you could say, kind of being douchey. You know, because he was like, oh yeah, this card game's getting out of line. Ha 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 ha, right? And then she was like, okay, well, I guess I'll talk to you later. And then he's like, all right, goodbye. And before he's going to hang up, he's trying to say, hey, Sandy, because his wife's name is Sandy. And afterwards, you know, he was just thinking, like, I am a jerk, you know? Basically, he was, you know? It was kind of stupid how he did that. But you find out later in the story why, right? So later on, he goes to sleep. He has a dream of his kid playing in the jungle. And all of a sudden, he's playing with his little toy truck or whatever. Then all of a sudden this hand pops out from the grave, and he's like screaming, ah! He wakes up from the nightmare, flip the fuck out. And then he gets his like 1980 suitcase that doesn't even have the zipper like to open it in half, but it's like the side, zoop, throws all kinds of shit, goes to his aunt's house and talks to the realtor. And the realtor is telling him, oh yeah, you know, I cleaned up this house, and we can get a lot of money for some of this junk, you know? Just kind of downgrading, like, you know, I don't know if if you guys caught this, but I caught that the realtor, he was kind of a dick. He was just there to make money, you know? And they implied that a lot with his character and what he was saying and stuff like that, right? And then, you know, then it starts showing flashbacks of everything of Roger. He's outside in the backyard, he's doing the yard, clipping the trees and shit. And then all of a sudden he sees his kid. Next minute he turns around and his kid's gone. Then all of a sudden, this is the thing that fucked me up. His kid's gone, right? He goes to the front door, or the front of the house, and then all of a sudden he sees his car start up super quick, and then peels out. But then they never get back to it. Like, why the fuck would you show a car peeling out and then have nothing to do with it? Yeah, I'll tell you about that more in a little bit, right? So he goes back into the house, and then he's trying to see where his son's at. And then it shows his son swimming in the pool. Then he's like, what the fuck? So he runs, jumps in the pool, and his kid's nowhere to be found. His kid's name's Jimmy, so he's screaming, Jimmy! Jimmy! Right? Nothing. And then, you know, it shows back to how he's talking to the realtor and everything like that. And then it shows, he sees, like, everything's all said and done. And then they go to, what was it? The shack outside. I guess it was like the garage or whatever. And then they start talking about how his aunt, you know, used to think the house was haunted and how she used to paint weird drawings and stuff. And if you pay attention, it's not just that one picture. If you know, see the paintings and all the backgrounds of the movie, the whole movie is basically given away from all the paintings. It's really cool. I was like, nah, that's bullshit. I seen this movie this whole week, you know, for this episode. I've seen it a record times of 23 times. I'm not kidding. Frame by frame, just like, oh shit, there it is. Oh shit, that's what the scene's coming up, right? So anyways, as they're talking about that, he goes back in the house and sees a picture of him, his wife, and his kid. And then it, you know, goes back into the flashback scene where he's talking to the cops. And the cops are like, okay, well, we put an APB on your son. We'll let you know if anything changes, right? Then his aunt comes around. It was a house. It was a house that did it. You know, for the longest time, we all used to fucking joke around when I was a kid. Whenever my mom would get mad at us, like, hey, you need to clean up this shit. Well, it wasn't us. It was the house. The house that did it. We were fucking crazy kids. I mean, what can I say, you know? But anyways, he tells the realtor, hey, I'm not selling, right? And the realtor is kind of getting pissed off, shoving all those papers in there. Well, I hope you can reconsider, right? And then he tells him, well, I think I'm going to stay and do some work, right? And that's basically what he intended to do. But then later on, now that you know the little bit of backstory of Roger Cobb, you start understanding, okay, this guy, he's got a little bit of marbles that are rolling around, you know? He's got a little bit of demons that he's living with, right? So it shows that he gets ready and everything like that, and he goes to bed. And then he wakes up in his dream, and he's back at fucking Vietnam. And he's just like tripping out because he feels like it's so real. And then all of a sudden, you know, he starts talking to Big Ben, his buddy. And they called him Big Ben because he was a big-ass dude. He was played by Richard Mall. Richard Mall, he's one of my favorite actors because he was the voice of Two-Face in Batman the Animated Series. Best voice ever for Two-Face, right? So anyways, they show how they're in Vietnam. They're planning to, you know, gear up and try to get out of the jungle and shit. And then Big Ben's fucking with him because, you know, he's like trying to smoke a cigarette and he can't. So he asks Ben, what? Give me a cigarette. All right. So he gives him a tin can. He opens up the tin can, it's a fucking snake. So he's being like, oh shit. Then they're yelling at him like, hey, you need to shut up, you know? After that scene, then basically, you know, because of them being all loud and causing a ruckus, then all of a sudden they see a grenade. You know, Big Ben's like, get down! They start fucking firing and shit. You know, and then, you know, Roger, he wakes up. And basically, you know, little by little, he starts to see things, like, really out of place in the house, you know? He starts walking around the house, you know, he goes into the room where his aunt had, you know, hung herself. And he starts seeing, like, weird visions, like, where she's, like, a ghost, and then she's like, you need to leave, Roger. This house got me. It's gonna get you. It knows everything about you. Leave while you can. And she, like, hangs herself, right? But she's a ghost. And he trips out. And it shows how, you know, when the clock goes at the midnight, he goes into the closet. I don't know why he was going into the closet in the room that she hung herself. It was weird. He opens it, and all of a sudden this, I guess, they call it the war demon, right? The war demon is basically all the souls that were lost in Vietnam. They'll come together. It comes out of this closet like this and shit, right? And they come out kind of similar like Hellraiser when that monster came out of the wall and shit. And they tries to grab Roger, and he closes the door and locks it, but not before it like cuts him and shit. And then it goes into the cheesiest 80s thing ever, right? He orders all these fucking, high-tech items, right? And it was funny because he starts setting it all up. So it's not like my setup right now where I have the lights and one camera and shit. He had like 50 fucking DSLR cameras and, the old school VHS camera. The camcorders where you got to put the tape in, very classic, very retro for me. I always enjoyed it because I grew around that generation, And then anyways, he's all geared up in his military gear and everything. But it was kind of funny because, he's like preparing, I don't know, they kind of made it comedic. I don't think they, obviously when they make this film, it was not meant to be comedic, but they put some comedic scenes in there to kind of take the edge off. I get that, okay? I'm not a, horror comedy kind of guy, but I mean, this film, I'm okay with, right? So it shows he gears up all of his cameras and everything like that. He prepares, he runs out like something was going to happen. He's like, yeah! Then he sees his neighbor, right? His neighbor was like, oh, riding must be kind of fun, huh? Earlier in the day before, he had met his neighbor. He was taking out this trash when, he was staring at the neighbor across the street. She's, I guess you could say she was like the hot chick of the neighborhood. So he's like staring at her, and then she's like, oh, hey, hi. And what's funny is that his neighbor's name is Harold. And everybody knows Harold because he was Norm from Cheers. What was his fucking name? George Wendt. And it's funny because he goes up, he goes, howdy neighbor, you just moved in? He was doing his yard, watering his shit. He's like, oh yeah, He's like, oh man, glad you're here, The bitch that lived here before you was the biggest bitch under the sun. I wouldn't be surprised if someone often hacked her already, And then he was like, oh, she was my aunt. And real quick, he's like, but a heart of gold though. Heart of gold. Very good looking woman for her age, I thought it was kind of funny. But anyways, back up to that scene. He sees his neighbor and everything, and he's like, oh yeah, I'm going to go back in and work on Solitude, work on my writing. So little by little, I guess you could say Roger, he kind of goes a little crazy, Not so much crazy, but it's just, you can tell he is a lonely guy, and he's dealing with a lot, And you find out a little bit more what weighs on him, right? He gets everything all set up, and just out of the blue, he starts seeing things. He starts hearing things. He's in the room, and he sees this big-ass marlin fish that his uncle had caught. It's on the wall, and all of a sudden starts playing this weird music, and the eyeballs all fucking moving and shit, and staring at him. Then he starts flipping out, like, stop it, God, stop, shit! So he goes into the shed, sees an old shotgun, loads it up, and he shoots it twice, with a double-barrel shotgun. And then he goes into the closet, covers it up. And then all of a sudden, he goes, trying to look for more bullets, loads them in the shotgun and everything like that. And he's looking around all over in the house. And as he went out to the shed, that's when you start seeing the, the garden tools. They came alive, and they were just, trying to come after him and shit. And it's just so much happening at once. And you don't know if it's Roger or if it's the house that's really haunted or what, because nobody else sees it, just Roger, right? He comes down the stairs, he sees his ex-wife, and she's like, hey. He's like, what the hell are you doing here? And she's like, I was worried about you. I wanted to come and see you, right? And, he was just like, okay, this is kind of weird. And she's like, what are you doing with that gun? Oh, well, hold on. And he puts it down on the table. And what I thought was crazy is that it was an empty shotgun shell, and it starts rolling. I know that's bullshit because empty shotgun shells don't roll. So it rolls, and all of a sudden he's all calling her, Sandy. She gets up and ends up she turns into this fucking witch, like all that shit. He starts flipping the fuck out, and she throws the table and everything like that, and she punches him. He grabs a gun, and then he shoots her. Boom, boom, right? She goes out, and then all of a sudden he starts freaking out because now it went from a witch to his ex-wife, and then he starts flipping the fuck out. He starts hearing the cops because his neighbor's being a fucking snoop. He calls the cops and says, yeah, I want to report attempted suicide, So he hides Sandy underneath the stairs in the cabinet. And the dumbest thing is that he's sitting outside cleaning the gun and, the cops come, and they tell him, hey, you need to put your hands up, right? And they have a little conversation, and they basically said, someone's been firing a shotgun over here, and what I thought was crazy is that they were only going to give him a misdemeanor. And I'm thinking, holy shit, if you do that anywhere else in the world, man, they take that shit right away. But anyways, once they figured out that he was Roger Cobb, and he's this famous writer, they said, okay, well, we'll let you off with a warning, but can we go in the house and use the bathroom? And then he was like, no. Well, yeah, you can. So he invites him in, and it's two cops, and one of them happens to be Alan Autry. I laugh at it because, because of that role, I guess you could say it kind of built up his character as Bubba from In the Heat of the Night. And as I said before, he was the mayor of Fresno for a long time. And I don't know if he's still around. I haven't seen him any time recently, but I know for a while he used to be able to see him like at the near gas station and shit. It was crazy. But anyways, they go in the house, and then what's his name? Harold tries to come in. And he's like, "Goodbye, Harold," and then they get him. He tries to have coffee, and then he offers him coffee, and then Harold comes back in. Yeah, coffee would be nice. So they're sitting there having coffee. He's all fucking nervous, putting the tea down and everything. Oh, not the tea, the coffee, because he's like, "Oh, is instant okay?" And later on, then he starts seeing like the shotgun shells. He picks them up, and then the cop's like, "Well, I thought you said you were cleaning it." And he's like, "Well, what's the point of cleaning if you don't keep it loaded every now and then?" He's like, "Oh, okay." So the cops and Harold left. Then he goes up and has to deal with the, with Sandy, right? And he goes underneath the stairs, and she's not there. So he goes up, right? And then all of a sudden he's, goes into the closet where in the same room where his aunt had hung herself, right? And that's when it starts building that slow, methodical movement. This is where it builds up kind of like Jason, where you see the guy pop up and then he's like slowly coming and then whack, with the back of the rifle. And then it starts fucking with him. Like, "Where's your son, Roger? He's dead." And that's when he tries to fight back. And then, of course, in every fucking horror film, he trips over the fucking door. Gets, I guess you could say smacked in the face with the fucking butt of the rifle. And then the witch is coming at him, ready to hit him. And then all of a sudden, the garden tools that were fucking with him followed in the house. And he locked him in the room. He opens the door and goes down. And then all of a sudden, they come and they, like, stab the witch and shit and cut off her head. And this is where it kind of gets a little comedic, It plays, what was it? You're No Good. And it's like, you see him come out and his eyes are just like looking around. And then he bags everything up and tries to bury it and everything. While he's out there, then he sees a cute neighbor, like, swimming in the pool. And then she's like, "Oh, well, your aunt used to let me swim here. And, I wanted to come by and swim and meet you and everything." As he's, talking to her, he has this big-ass bag, and she sees what it is, but she doesn't know what's in it. And so she asks, "Oh, is that a sapling?" "Oh, yeah, it's a sapling," and then you see the witch's arm trying to come out and grab her foot. So he's, like, stepping on it and shit. And then she's like, "Okay, well, I know when a man wants to play and when he wants to work, so I guess I'll see you later." And he's like, "All right, bye," and then that's when he snaps and beats the shit out of the witch again. Then he pulls out one of the hacksaw, or not the hacksaw. He pulls out an axe, and then he starts laughing. So what he does here is that he chops up the fucking witch and buries her in different parts. Because he thinks that's going to take care of it, right? Goes in the house, gets all cleaned up and showered. Starts writing on his book, And then that's when you find out what happens with Ben. Where, all of a sudden it's night. They're in the jungle. And then all of a sudden, they have to go walk point. Walk point is where, they go up in front and make sure everything's clear for the platoon, right? At least from my knowledge. I never served in the military or anything, but I have family members that served in there. So they start walking point. And then Big Ben starts fucking with him like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And then he's all telling him, "Well, I heard a noise. Slow down." And he's like, "Well, you're the one that heard the noise, right? I gotta keep moving. I can tell you what I could do." He goes, "Let's look for Charlie." And so he starts being loud and being stupid, right? Then the scene ends. Then you see the neighbor lady comes in. She goes, "Hey," she's all dolled up and everything. "I know you're ready to play." And so, she basically implied, like, she wanted to, not for sexual advances or anything, but he took it that way, and she didn't mean it like that. She meant it as, like, a babysitter. And so she has her kid, she's holding his hand and everything. And I was dying when I saw this, because the kid had a fucking mullet. And I laugh at that mullet, because I had that same fucking haircut, where it's just like, it looked like a bowl, and then you had the fucking tail, the rat tail going down, man. It was the 80s. You gotta live the time, man. So he's all like trying to brush her off, like, no, 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 I can't. And then he sees the witch hand got out. It was like gripped onto the kid's back. So he's like, oh shit, okay. So he starts playing with the kid and he's telling her like, no, wait, I'll go get him. So he goes, gets the kid, finds the kid in the bathroom, pulls the hand out, bites the hand so it'll let go, then he flushes it down the toilet. Then, you know, he tells her, oh, okay, well, I feel bad, you know, because the kid was crying. I'll watch him. And so, you know, the mom gave him all this shit and everything, and then she was like, okay, bye, I'll see you later. You know, they never said if she was married or anything, but they implied that she was like a single mom. So, you know, he gets back to work writing, and then all of a sudden, that's when, you know, the kid starts kind of getting a little antsy and everything. Then he, you know, pats him down, puts him to sleep, and starts, you know, working on his story. And then he starts to think about that moment, what happened, you know, with him and Ben, that last moment. Then all of a sudden he starts calling for the kid. And then he sees that the kid's walking with these monsters and shit. Fucking creepy, right? He goes up to the room. I think it was the aunt's room, actually. And, you know, they see these monsters, like, smiling, laughing, and then they close the door. And then he goes in there and he sees the kid get pulled up. So he gets underneath. Gets pulled up a fucking chimney, right? He goes over there and he has his feet on the side. And he's trying to pull this kid down. And it's playing the fucking... I call it the Jason music because it's like... Dun, 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 right? And so he finally gets the kid down. And the kid's not crying about it or anything like that because the monsters let him go. And then he was in the bathtub. He bathed the kid and everything. The mom came. He dropped off the kid to her. And then that's when he called his neighbor over. And, you know, keep this in mind. He told his neighbor about the monster in the closet. And he thought he was Looney Tunes. So he said, okay, I need your help. Because all these cameras are here to help me catch this big-ass raccoon. So right when it hits to midnight, I want you to shoot this harpoon at it. So that way we can get this raccoon out of here, you know? And this whole movie was kind of cool. It had, like, winks to different horror films, you know? And he was laughing. He goes, oh, Cujo the raccoon. Cujo was the crazy rabid dog from Stephen King, right? And so anyways, when midnight hits, then all of a sudden this monster comes out. Harold shoots it. And then all of a sudden he's like, pull it, because it's a harpoon with the stick. Or not with a stick, with a fucking, with a rope and shit. And so... he's like, what can I do? He's like, grab onto me, help me, you know, because he gets pulled in and sucked in, right? He's like, don't worry, I won't let you go. So Roger, he's getting pulled away, right? And then, you know, then you see Harold like, oh, fuck. Because they were going to drink and hang out, watch the ball game or whatever, right? And then you find out what happens with Big Ben. You know, he finally sees Big Ben after Big Ben got shot and ambushed from all the Viet Cong soldiers and shit. And then he's telling Roger, hey, take me out, I don't want to suffer. And he's like, I can't do it. I'm going to go get help, buddy. I'm going to go get help. And then that's when he runs and hides. And the Viet Cong guys, they see, you know, Big Ben. And they pull him up. And he's like, Roger, I'll get you for this, I swear. And, you know, he starts flipping the fuck out. And then he sees that there's this big white door, you know, where he can run through and get back into the house. So as he's running, the Viet Cong people, you know, the Viet Cong soldiers, they're shooting at him. He jumps through and he sees Harold's like drunk as shit, you know, laying there with a bottle of Jack. He's like, oh, Roger, oh, thank God you're alive, you know, like the drunk thing or whatever. So he carries him back to his house, lays him down on his couch, you know, and Roger, he's this tiny little guy, and, you know, George Wentz, you know, Norm, he's usually this big dude, you know, lays him down, covers him up and everything, goes back in the house, and then he starts to think, like, oh, shit, and then he starts to think that his aunt wasn't crazy, right? He goes into the shed, and he sees that painting from him and the realtor. There was a towel covering, you know, one spot. He pulls the towel down, and you see his son in the fucking mirror. And it's like, whoa, okay, this is a big fucking twist. So that's when he gears up, and then he throws a fucking stool right through the mirror. And it's like a portal back to where he was going to go in the jungle. So he throws the fucking rope, and that's when monsters kind of try to come out and try to grab him and shit, and then he fights them off. Then he comes back with the shotgun. He starts to slide down on it. Then this, I guess you could say, it looks like, I don't know, it's a skull with fucking, it's a bat skull, I guess. It's a skull head with fucking bat wings and legs and shit. It starts fucking with him. Then it grabs his shotgun, shoots the rope, so he has to go all the way down. He goes down into this water, and then he swims up, and he's back in, you know, the Vietnam jungles, right? He sees this kid, and he's like, oh my God, you know, because this kid was missing already at this point in 2 years. Because in their realm, I guess time went by super slow because this kid didn't age. But in the real world, it was like, you know, already 2 years almost, right? He sees his son. He breaks him out of the cage. They jump back in there, and then they swim out of the lake, and then they're in the pool. You know, it was weird. And then it ends up looking like it's a happy ending, right? Not so fast. That's when they get up to the front door, and then you hear Big Ben, sucker! And he's like, Big Ben! And Ben's like, no, it's your fairy godmother. Who else? And he's like, you took my kid? He's like, why didn't you kill me when you had the chance, Roger? I would have died for you, Ben. Well, now here's your chance. He's like, no! Slams the door on him, tells his son. I thought this was crazy. His son was missing for 2 years, and he tells his son, get out of the house! Go! I'll handle this! And Ben, he breaks through the door, and he's like, you're starting to piss me off, Roger. And, little by little, he starts fucking with Roger. And they, kind of scuffle, and they go around. They punch each other and shit. And he's trying to run around and hide. Then finally, they had where he kicked him down the stairs. And Roger starts to fight back, and then he starts calling him, is that all you got, you little wimp? And they started fighting and everything. And when they get to it, Big Ben, he has, the full control of everything because he can make it look like it's weird and shit. So Roger runs in the kitchen and it looks like it's at the edge of a cliff and he's hanging on. And he's like, you lost, buddy. And he tries to step on his hands while he's holding it. So he pulls out his military belt, grabs his hand and throws him down. And he thinks that's the end of it and he climbs up. And he's back up. And then he's looking for his son, Jimmy. And then finally when he sees his son, Jimmy, he gets picked up by Big Ben. And he was like, you should have killed me when you had the chance, Roger. I told you I'd come back. And then, he told him, you got to kill yourself or otherwise I'm going to kill your boy. And he was like, no. Then he tries to cut his hand, and then his hand is cut, but then it goes back and his hand's normal. And then he's like, I beat you and this goddamn house. I'm not afraid of you, Ben. And he's like, oh, don't do it. I'll kill your boy. You can't hurt my boy. And he pulls his son down, throws a knife down, and he basically tells him, I beat you in this goddamn house. And then he pulls a grenade off of him, pulls the pin, puts it underneath his ribcage, because he looks like a zombie, right? And then he's like, I'll see you later, sucker. He's like, no, I'll get you for this, Roger. Oh, boom. He blows up, right? At this point, his wife pulls up in a taxi, and she's informed by the neighbor, Harold, that Roger was kind of going crazy, and she needed to see him. So she finally made the time to come up to see him. Then, the house is all blown up and shit. He comes out, and then he's holding his son. The son runs to the mom and says, Mommy! And everything's all fine and dandy. And it's the end of the movie, right? Personally, for me, I love this movie because of the fact of, it was I see it as, it was a horror film, and they kind of toned it down a little bit here and there for some scenes. They wanted to make it more like, I guess you could say, not family-oriented, but for everybody to enjoy. Because some people, they can't handle, scariness where it's shit pops out, like the new stuff that they make, right? But what I thought is interesting is, remember I was telling you about the themes, right? I say it's a man who's dealing with his demons, because you got to look at it at this point, right? He's living with the demon fact of he has a lot of guilt. And, it raised awareness on post-traumatic stress syndrome. And I think this was one of the very first films that kind of raised the awareness on it, but it did obviously to the extreme, but it raised awareness on it, because here he felt guilt of what he did, and he had to live with that guilt. And it implied to me, because he was living with that guilt, he started writing all his thoughts down, and he turned his thoughts into horror stories, which is how he became famous. That's how I see it, right? Now, with the situation with him and his wife, when his son went missing, they basically implied that they went through a divorce, right? And they went through a divorce because, here Roger, he kind of snapped, and she didn't want to deal with that. Because if you listen into the first conversation where she was all stoked about him actually starting to write and everything like that, he hadn't wrote in a while, obviously, since his son was missing, And, I got the vibe that she had left him because, he kind of went into his own little world of things and dealing with his own personal demons. And, the fact that they were still kind of friends because of their son and stuff, it had a lot. It really did, And I can understand where this whole film was going. This guy had the weight of the world on his back. And he wasn't imagining things. It was just somebody had bad juju on him, and he was just, dealing with all that shit. And that's the way I see this film. And, Personally, it's one of my favorites. It really is, because, you know, here it has all these aspects, and it basically shows that no matter what he was doing, he was still going to do it. He didn't give a shit. You know, he was like, okay, well, I'm still going to write the story about my experiences. He had to get that out, you know, and he got it. He took care of it, you know. That's the thing that I really liked about this film, you know. As I said also, too, you know, you had almost a lot of people that worked in the original Friday the 13th Part 2 and Part 3. They all worked in this film, and it shows. You know, everything from the music, from the writing, from how some of the suspense scenes, like when the witch is slowly coming up right behind Roger and then just whacks, you know, knocks him out, right? But then also, too, the monsters and the creatures, they took like at least 3 months to make. But I think the people that did the makeup and the effects for all that shit, they were the ones, I think, that did Evil Dead 1 or 2, if I'm not mistaken. And I can't remember which one it was, 1 or 2. But I know you could see that they worked on Evil Dead. Just because, like, the creature, like, in the closet that was smiling and closed the closet door. You know, the smile was, like, fucking from ear to ear, and the mouth was, like, this big. It reminded me a lot of Evil Dead. Like, they had to have worked on Evil Dead, you know? And then I did the research on it, and I was like, oh, shit, they did. You know? It's kind of interesting, because there was a lot of stuff, you know? And as I said, this movie, what I love about Fred Dekker, the way he writes, is that he puts little clues behind the back of the film somewhere, you know? And what I loved about it is that it was always a rumor that the paintings in the background, like, explains the whole movie. And I thought, whatever, you know? But I have it on DVD, so it wasn't as clear. So I pop it in on my Blu-ray player and pause it in the frames where you could see it. And no joke. Like, I saw that and I was like, holy shit, it tells the whole story. Like, you see, like, the, the garden tools, like, attacking, you know, the ant. And then you see, you know, how she's, like, going to the closet and the closet door is open, but she's also ready to hang herself and the clock's at midnight. And you see, obviously, Jimmy stuck in the mirror, you know. One of the pictures also showed Big Ben. It showed, like, a zombie, like, coming out. You know, what I thought was pretty cool, you know. There was a lot of little interesting tidbits on that. And as I said, you know, I'm a local boy. They would play this movie all the time because Alan Autry was in it. He's, you know, like I said, he's really big in TV show for In the Heat of the Night. But when he was mayor in Fresno, they would always play all the stuff, you know, because we all took pride in that. They would play, like, you know, constant reruns of his old shows, but he didn't, I can't remember if he did a lot of films or not. But I know his main one that everybody had always talked about was House. And when they would show it on TV, you know, you would see like 5 minutes of him in that scene where he goes to Roger's house and talks to him and stuff like that and then leaves. They would play the movie constantly because he was in it, which I thought was interesting. It was really cool, you know. But if you haven't seen House, you know, take a gander on it. It's not that bad of a movie. Honestly, I've seen that film, Part 1 and 2. 2 has nothing to do with Part 1, by the way. Part 1 and 2 together in a double feature, and $5 horror bins. You know, whether you go to your big department store or video stores, the movie's not that much. So if you see it, take a gander at it. You won't be disappointed. Trust me. It's fun for everybody to enjoy. It's fun for people, like, trying to get into horror, but, you know, doesn't like the pop scares and stuff like that, you know. But take a gander on it. You won't be disappointed, you know. Thank you all for helping me start off year 2 right. You know, with episode 42. And as always, you know, once I'm done, y'all know where it goes, right?